Now, along the way, we're going to be looking for several things in the religions that we study. First of all, origins. How and why does a religion start? What was the cultural milieu out of which this religion developed? What was the founder's story? Or, if there wasn't a founder, from what did this tradition emerge? Why did it develop the way it did? One thing you'll find when you start studying religions is that every religion is based on something that came before it, with the exception perhaps of native traditions, which is about as far back as we can actually go. But every other tradition is based on that or something else that came before. And so as we actually study these traditions in the chronological order of development, which is what we'll be doing, you'll be able to see a through line from one side all the way to the other, a clear line of influence and development. Also, we're going to be looking for theology. What are the main beliefs of these traditions? What are the theological tenets of the faith? How is it similar to what's gone before, and how is it novel? What is its view of divinity? What does divinity want from human beings? How does divinity behave towards human beings or towards creation? We're also going to be looking at soteriology. This is a very big word that actually means what's the problem with human nature and how do we fix it? The word is actually related to our word salve or healing. Sometimes it's called salvation theory. So, what is the core issue of human existence that needs to be addressed? And then how does this religion understand the problem, and how does it attempt to address it? For instance, in native traditions, the question is almost always, how do we survive? In Taoism, the problem is that we have forgotten our true natures. In Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Jainism, we are trapped in an illusion. In Zoroastrianism, we're caught in the crossfire of a cosmic war. In Judaism, we hearken back to the native question again. How do we survive? In Christianity, the problem is, oh my God, I'm going to die. And in Islam, the problem is, how do we keep people from killing each other here? So, be paying attention as you are looking at the various traditions as to what they see the main problem as being and how each tradition tries to fix it. Another thing to be paying attention to is practice. How is this faith lived out on a daily basis? What does worship look like? What are the liturgical forms employed? And what effect do these have on people who practice the tradition? What spiritual disciplines are practiced? How are they efficacious? What kinds of service is honored in this tradition? How is it encouraged? And what's its impact? And finally, be paying attention to eschatology. Now this means what happens at the end of one's life. Also, it can mean how is the world going to end? This is the difference between personal and general eschatology. Is there an afterlife? If so, what's it like? How does one prepare for it? If there's not an afterlife, what's the purpose of this life? And as far as the end of the world goes, how's that going to happen? And what happens then? Now, because this is a school that is interested and really dives deep into a holistic view of the world, we're going to be looking at a holistic view of the world religions as well. We're going to be looking at the transpersonal aspect that each religion draws upon. because each religion does. Carl Jung did a marvelous job or a marvelous favor for us by outlining kind of an uber model for the spiritual quest that is common in each of the world's religions. He stated in non-religious language the journey that every religion known to humankind describes by means of its own mythology and symbols, etc. Jung says that we suffer because we mistakenly believe that the ego is who we are. But Jung says that who we really are is the capital S self, which is all that is. Until we get that, we're trapped in an illusion. And we're acting out of a mistaken understanding of ourselves and the world. The spiritual goal of nearly every tradition is disidentification from the ego and the re-identification with the larger S self, the larger reality with which we're all a part. Now, in different traditions, this looks different. So for instance, for native tradition, the larger self is nature. In Taoism, the larger S self is the Tao. In Hinduism, the larger self is Brahman, or God. In Buddhism, the larger self is all that is, and paradoxically, emptiness. In Judaism, the larger self is Israel, not the nation, but the people. In Christianity, the larger self is Christ, in whom St. Paul says we live and move and have our being. In Islam, the larger self is the Ummah, the just society that the Quran is helping us to create. In Sufism, the larger self is Allah, God. Religion is a profoundly transpersonal enterprise, clothed in what appears to be an almost arbitrary assortment of exotic dress, culturally specific stories, rituals, and worldviews that nevertheless describe the same essential spiritual process: the disidentification with the ego and the re-identification with a larger self. Another aspect of this course is scripture. You're going to be reading a lot of scripture in Novak's book, which is a terrific anthology of scripture from many of the world's traditions. But what do we mean by scripture? Of course, every religion kind of defines this differently. We have to wonder, how does a writing achieve a scriptural status in a tradition? As I said, all the traditions have different criteria for this. Some traditions have an open canon, meaning they have set these books and these are the only books that will ever be scripture, whereas some traditions have an open canon. Books are still being added. Who gets to decide what's in a canon of scripture anyway? And also, different sects, do they have different canons? You bet. Let's take, for example, different schools of Hinduism honor different books. Now, they're going to agree on some books, but they're going to disagree on many others. Even within Christianity, there's disagreement about what books are actually scripture. Does the Book of Mormon count? Not for Baptists, generally. How can you tell, when we're talking scripture, whether it's revealed or not? In other words, just because something is a scripture, does that mean that it's divinely inspired? If not, what makes it scripture? And how much authority does a scripture have? Are there levels of authority? Are some scriptures more authoritative than others? The answer is yes. But of course, every tradition has its own tree of what, its own chart of what scriptures are considered authoritative and how authoritative they actually are. And again, different sects have different answers for that as well. Whew. How are we going to keep it all straight? Well, first of all, we're not. Don't worry about it. Just let it wash over you. Just read the readings, do the postings, do your presentation, do your paper. What's important will stick. And the stuff that isn't that important won't stick. But you know what? When you want to find out more about something, you're going to know where to look. And that's a really important thing. Now, besides your weekly readings and postings, we've got a couple of major projects for this class. First of all is your final paper. Your final paper should be 5 to 10 pages, and it should cover a tradition that we do not cover in class. All right, maybe not a major tradition, but a minor tradition. Something that is not covered in our 10 weeks. There's a whole list of those on the syllabus. Feel free to choose one of those, or if you have an idea of something else you'd like to do, send me an email and let me know what it is. If I approve it, no problem. Go ahead and write on that. Now, also, there's a practices presentation. We're going to ask you to make one PowerPoint presentation to the class on the practices of a particular tradition. So you're going to have to choose one of the traditions that we are covering and select one of those to do your report on. And if there's more people in the class than there are weeks, then you can double up. Have a partner to work on with this, and then present your presentation to the class during the week when we're covering that, so that you will be contributing to the education of your fellow students for that week. If you have any problems, you can always give me a call or send me an email. My contact info is also on the syllabus. I think that's enough for now. Again, welcome to this course.